We're going to talk more now about the next budget crisis possibly facing Washington, a possible government shutdown due to insufficient funds. If it comes to that, joining me now are two people trying to keep that from happening. Maryland Congressman Chris Van Hollen is the top Democrat on the House Budget Committee, and California Republican Kevin McCarthy is the GOP whip. Thank you for being here in this not snowstorm, kind of a rainstorm here in Washington. Congressman McCarthy, first to you. The CR, continuing resolution, passed today, 267 to 151. What is the plan now? It goes over to the Senate. What happens if the Senate alters it in some way and it comes back to you altered?
Well, I'd caution Reid to not alter it. This is a bill that was bipartisan out of the House, a strong vote. Able to move forward, fund the government to the rest of the fiscal year, September 30th. It helps the military, DOD, MILCON, and Veterans Affairs in there, that to little fluctuation controlling of the money. I think it's a good bill, shown in the House, a very strong bill. It'd be smart for them to pass it, move forward, not bring any doubt about a shutdown, and take away the uncertainty for the rest of the fiscal year so we can move on to other items.
But if they do alter it?
We'd have to look at it, but I'd caution against it.
Congressman Van Hollen, you were one of the nays today, one of the 151 against the CR. Your district has a lot of federal workers, a lot of people tied to the federal government. This would fund the federal government. Why vote against it?
Well, the good news is there now seems to be bipartisan agreement that we will not shut down the federal government. But we can do a lot better than this bill in two ways. One, this was really our last chance this month to replace the sequester. And I have asked 4 times now this year for a vote in the House of Representatives on an alternative to the sequester that would achieve the same amount of deficit reduction without losing 750,000 jobs. And that's not the President's number or my number. That's the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office number. So I think we should have taken this opportunity not only to keep the government going, but to prevent the loss of over 750,000 American jobs by replacing the sequester. I think we can improve upon this. I think the Senate will, and I look forward to voting for it when it comes back. But I hope we'll use this intervening time to replace the sequester in a smart way.
Is this replacing the sequester, the $982 billion, as it is currently, the continuing resolution?
It's not replace it. The sequester comes in, you cut $85 billion out of approximately $3.6 trillion. This carries the sequester number forward, but gives the Department of Defense and the military greater flexibility in how they go about the cuts. Now, Chris lays out his bill that he proposed numerous times, but that's just, and it's the exact same bill that the Senate Democrats proposed that couldn't even get out of the Senate, that even some Democrats voted against it. So that was going nowhere. This is an opportunity that had bipartisan support, moved to the Senate, could move us forward. And remember, it met the criteria that the President laid out last week that he said he could actually sign.
You're saying the Republicans definitively are not going to move off the ball on increased revenue, meaning closing loopholes, deductions, anything on this CR?
Okay. Chris and the Democrats, they got their tax increase already.
Brett, look, a couple things. First of all, the Senate Democratic plan got a majority vote. The only reason it didn't pass the Senate was because Republicans used their obstructionist tactics, which they're allowed to do in the Senate, to block it. Our bill contains cuts and cuts to tax breaks. Kevin keeps, our Republican colleagues think the budget conversation started January 1st. We have been at this now for a couple years. We have already cut $1.5 trillion by applying spending caps. We have $600 billion in revenues from higher income folks, which Kevin didn't like. But our view is we can also get a lot of the junk out of the tax code in terms of special interest tax breaks and use that to help reduce the deficit, which is what bipartisan commissions have done. But our Republican colleagues have taken the position, and many have signed that Grover Norquist pledge, that says you can't shut down the corporate jet loophole, you can't take away a subsidy for a big oil company, if you want to use the money to help reduce the deficit.
This is what the President has been talking about. And even Friday, Congressman, President Obama suggested that he would be willing to move on and do a deal on the continuing resolution. And 53 Democrats obviously agreed that this was not the fight to have right now. You're just not one of them.
No, we agree that we're not going to fight about shutting down the federal government. We don't want to shut down the federal government.
But your vote no would do that.
No, my vote no was to say, Senate, you need to improve on this bill. There were a couple things in there. fact that they provided a little more flexibility for the military. That's good. But they did not provide any additional flexibility to all the other domestic agencies. The Senate can do that. Send it back, and we will pass it with strong support. But again, I wish we'd taken this opportunity to prevent the sequester and the job loss that will come.
Well, we had this. Remember where this came from. Sequestration came from the White House, and the Republicans passed twice the ability to move sequestration, still have the cuts, but take it in a better manner, moved it to the Senate twice, nothing ever came about it. The President talked a lot, but did nothing until the day of sequester coming forward and brought the leaders down for a photo.
Right, so tonight the President's sitting down with Republican senators, apparently at dinner, and we don't know what the conversation is going to be, but he is talking like he wants a big deal. At least he's talking about it privately, we're told. Do you think the President wants a big deal, or do you think that this is about politics in 2014?
I think you've watched the President's numbers, approval rating go from 53 to 43 in the short little time period. I think he's feeling the heat by being on a road show consistently. I think people are feeling frustrated by that. They want to see some leadership here. I'm not sure, because there's many times we've sat down with this President, tried to come to an agreement, and you never could get there. So I'm hopeful this all changes. I hope the pattern of the last 4 years changes his behavior, and maybe this is a wake-up call. Maybe he will start to work together.
Well, Kevin knows it's hard to reach an agreement when the Speaker of the House walks out of the discussions with the President, which is exactly what happened in December, because the Republicans in the House didn't want to raise any revenue, even on people who earned over $1 million. In fact, a great majority of their caucus voted against revenue from people over $1 million. That's a fundamental issue. The President has said during the campaign and since he wants to take a balanced approach.
On the question of the President's goals, this is how the Washington Post wrote it up. President Obama, fresh off his November re-election, began almost at once executing plans to win back the House in 2014, which he and his advisors believe will be crucial to the outcome of his second term and to the legacy as president. The goal is to flip the Republican-held House to the Democratic control, allowing Obama to push forward a progressive agenda. And it goes on to say, according to congressional Democrats, strategists, and others familiar with Obama's thinking. Are you familiar with the President's thinking in that regard?
Yeah, the President's thinking is he wants to follow through on the promises he made during the last presidential campaign. Now, I know a lot of people wish the outcome had been different in the presidential campaign, but it is what it is. And the President ran on policies to strengthen the middle class, to keep our commitments to seniors, to invest in our kids. So he's reaching out to Republicans to say, come on board. I want to work with you. I'm willing to compromise to get there. But I'm not willing to violate the promises and commitments I made during the campaign.
But that's not his action.
So no. So plan A is try and get Republicans to work with them. You got to have a plan B. If you guys refuse to work
on election night when you won, did you pick up the phone and call the DCCC chairman, the election campaign chair? That's when the President walked off the stage. Who did he call? Nancy Pelosi and Steve Israel. Your old job, the election campaign person. So it wasn't even to Harry Reid to say, let's build this policy and make the country better that I ran on. No. His was, let's keep this campaign going. Let's forget about policy, and let's try to win the House. I think the people are tired of elections,
McCarthy,
and they want people to govern.
How is it different than what Senator McConnell said in 2010, that, quote, the single most important thing we want to achieve is for President Obama to be a one-term president?
The fundamental is McConnell's in the minority, is a minority leader. He is president of the entire United States and just won a second term, and how many people are out of work? How long have we struggled? It's not an opportunity to keep the campaign going. It's a time to start governing. And on our side of the aisle, that's what we look forward to, and that's why we continue to move policy that puts us in the right direction, that lets people get back to work.
And that's exactly why the President has a bipartisan group down at the White House right now. That is why he's reaching out. You got to have a backup plan. And if Republicans continue to take
Nancy Pelosi,
but if Republicans continue to say we're not going to allow you to follow through on any of your campaign commitments, then you're going to need people who are willing to work with you. That's the issue.
Wrap it up there. Congressman Van Hollen, Congressman McCarthy, thank you very much for being here.
Thanks for having us.
A state law